Hello and welcome to another episode of the Preconceived Podcast, the podcast that asks the question, what are you really thinking? But on today's episode, I don't want to just talk about what we're thinking, but why we're thinking it. There's a huge component of our lives every single day that we use that directly affects our thinking, but I don't think we ever take the time to realize the impact it's having on our lives. So on today's episode, we're going to talk about the way that we see the world around us and how we can use it to improve our thought lives. Stay tuned. I just wanted to thank everyone once again for tuning into the Preconceived Podcast, whether it's on YouTube or on iTunes or however you're listening. I really appreciate it. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about improving our thought lives, which is a huge subject and way more than we can tackle in one video or one podcast. But I believe that there's one specific component that we need to start with when we're talking about improving our thought lives. It's something that we use every single day from the moment that we wake up to the time that we go to bed. It's something that uses 50% of our brain's power in order to use, and it actually uses the most active muscle group in our entire bodies. Do you know what we're talking about yet? If not, here's a riddle. It's something with a lid, but it's not a coffee mug. It's something with a socket, but it doesn't have a plug. Anybody? All right, we're talking about our eyes and we're talking about our vision, more importantly. Our vision is such an important thing. Like I said, 50% of our brain power goes into being able to see and process what we're looking at. We use more muscles in our eyes. They're more active than any other muscle group in our body. And our brains actually have the ability to process 1,000 frames per second coming from our eyes, which is better than any camera out there. The best one that I saw out there that's for sale is like 15 or 16 frames per second. But our eyes connected to our brains are processing 1,000 frames per second, and all that information is being flooded into our brains, which is being processed as data. So we can see that when we're taking in all this information, how important it really must be for our thinking. Which is why when we sing that song as kids, be careful little eyes what you see. Be careful little eyes what you see. For your Father up above is looking down with love. Be careful little eyes what you see. It's really important that we're aware of what we're seeing because there's so much information being processed at every moment. Our vision and our thinking and the way that we perceive the things that we're seeing have a huge impact on our lives. And the example that I like to use is when I started learning how to snowboard, and maybe if you're a snowboarder or a skier, you'll be able to relate to this. But I started and I learned all the basics and I quickly wanted to learn how to do some tricks. So I went to the park area and so I saw the jumps they had set up. And so I was able to get enough speed. That was never a problem. I was able to hit the jump perfectly. That wasn't a problem. But my issue was every time that I would hit the jump and get up in the air, I would find myself in this position, square to the mountain, landing on my butt every single time and usually getting hurt and having to kind of like snowboard away so that nobody would see me cry. But that was something that was happening every single time and I couldn't figure out why. Until I spoke to somebody who was really good at doing the tricks and they said, you know what, the most important thing is, or at least one of the most important things, is where your eyes are focusing. So what would happen is I'd get up there and I'd be looking down the mountain and that's what way my body was facing. But I learned that as I turned my head, wherever my vision went, whatever I was looking at, my body would follow. And if you watch the X Games and these guys doing these crazy tricks, their heads are always contorted and twisted in the area that they're going because when they know wherever their eyes are looking at, that's where the rest of them is going to follow. And it's the same with our lives. The things that we look at, the things that we focus on, the things that we allow ourselves to see are the things that are going to be directing our lives in those directions. Our vision, our perception is very, very important. Now, these are things just as simple as kind of what we're watching on TV shows or Netflix. The stuff we're looking at on social media, on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or YouTube. The things that we're watching, the things that we're allowing ourselves to see are going to be the things that are going to be directing our lives in a lot of different ways. And we probably don't realize it, but every one of those pictures and images that we're seeing on TV or on our phones is actually registering in our minds, in our unconscious minds. It's being filed away and stored away, and it's having an impact on our thinking. So am I saying that looking at the internet for a little while or scrolling through our phone is actually going to be changing our lives? Not necessarily, but what I am saying is that when we look at those things, they're reinforcing thoughts and ways of thinking that we already have. So when we're looking at those things, it is sometimes changing and shaping and forming what we're thinking, but often it's reinforcing thoughts that we have that maybe we don't even realize that we're thinking. So a great example of this would be Instagram. We look at Instagram and usually we scroll through some photos and sometimes we look at them, but there's a lot of different accounts and maybe it's our friends and family or celebrities. Whatever it is, people are putting forward an image that they want you to see. They're trying to change and shape the way that you look at life to see what's normal. So for our friends and family, they're putting their best pictures out there maybe. For celebrities, we're looking at their houses and their cars and all this different stuff. And what's happening is our reality in our minds of what life is being shaped and it's being changed by what is being portrayed, by what our eyes are seeing and what we're focusing on. For ladies, and I know you beautiful ladies out there, you never do this, but if you were to scroll through Instagram and see some of these makeup artists or models or celebrities, a lot of times it's very easy to look at their lives and think, oh, I wish I was that pretty. I wish I had what they had. I wish I had the house that they had or the car that they had or the clothes or whatever it might be. We're looking at these things and it's reinforcing a reality that may not be true. Because just because something's put out there, just because something is being portrayed, does not mean that it's normal. It does not mean that it's truth. It may be common, it may be something that everybody's putting out there, but it doesn't mean it's the truth of the way life is supposed to be. So our lives and our thoughts are being changed by what we're seeing and what we're perceiving. It's so important that we are intentional with what we're looking at and with what we're allowing our eyes to focus on. Now, I'm not saying we should stop looking at social media altogether. I'm not saying we should stop watching, Netflix or TV or especially this video. I mean, you got to keep watching this podcast. But I am saying that we need to be intentional with what we're looking at. A lot of times we try to stop doing one thing without actually replacing it with another. And I think that this is an important thing that we have to do. Don't just stop watching certain things, but replace it by intentionally looking at specific things that are going to show you what life really is, that are more importantly going to show you who God thinks that you are. This is things like the Bible, which is a really good option, but also books. I want to do a video soon about some of the books that I recommend, but maybe it's just videos with messages that are out there. It's so easy to get good content nowadays that if we choose to intentionally focus on those things, that we're starting to see things in a different light. And it's such a beneficial thing to change and to improve our thought life. And this is the final tip for today, but I think sometimes we need just to shut down the electronics altogether. Put the phone away, put the laptop away, and walk outside and look around and let our eyes take in some of the beauty of the world around us. Now, if we live in the Northeast, which is where I live, it's maybe not the best time to do this because everything's kind of just brown and the snow out there is looking brown. It's not great. But even in that, I'm sure we can find beauty. We can allow our eyes and our perception to take in some of just honestly the simple things that God's created and allow us to look at things in a different light. So this is just one simple way that we can start to improve our thought lives by looking at and perceiving things differently. So I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. And if you can answer this question down below, I'd really appreciate it. What is the one thing that you look at that makes you feel more alive? It could be your children, it could be a good book, it could be looking outside, but I'd love to hear what you have to say. And please, if you would, hit the subscribe button down below. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you for watching and have an awesome week.